Today's story takes place in Seattle and nearby Tacoma. Now, let's get right into it.
My name is Naomi Carter. I'm 28 years old, and the morning my father banned me from Thanksgiving, I was sitting under fluorescent office lights tracing missing money through a chain of shell accounts for a client who lied better than most criminals. My phone lit up with home, and I almost ignored it. I should have. The second I answered, my father didn't say hello. He said, "Don't come to Thanksgiving. You're a 28-year-old failure, and nobody here wants to look at you across the table." I actually thought I'd misheard him, so I asked why. Then my mother's voice crashed through the speaker, sharp enough to cut glass. "Because you still rent that depressing apartment. No husband, no kids, no house, no real life. Your cousin just bought her second home, and you're still acting like a confused teenager with a paycheck." I could hear laughter behind her. Not one person tried to stop it. Then my brother grabbed the phone and announced, like he was reading election results, "We took a family vote. You're banned. Even Grandma said you ruined the mood." More laughter. Then came the real reason. My father got back on the line and said, "You have 24 hours to pay off our credit cards. $52,000. You owe this family for everything we did for you." My mother laughed and added, "And we already found that $4,000 you hid in your old room. Consider it the first payment." That part hit harder than the insult. They hadn't just mocked me. They'd gone into my past, opened a place I once thought was mine, and stolen the one emergency fund I'd built in secret. Then they put me on speaker so everybody could enjoy my silence. I said one thing before they hung up. "You're going to regret this decision more than anything in your lives." Before I tell you what he said next, and what happened after I walked away from everything they thought they could take from me, tell me, what time is it for you right now? And where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. I didn't cry after the call. That was the first thing that scared me. I just sat there at my desk, staring at a spreadsheet full of fraud patterns while my own family replayed in my head like evidence in a case file. Public humiliation, extortion, theft, group intimidation. They really had put me on speaker so the whole room could laugh while demanding money. And the worst part was, none of it felt new. It felt familiar. Just louder. I finished my workday on autopilot, took the fairy-colored sky home through downtown Seattle, and unlocked my apartment with the numb kind of calm people mistake for weakness. It wasn't weakness. It was the moment something inside me stopped begging to be chosen. Around 9 that night, my phone started exploding. Missed calls from family, texts from unknown cousins, a photo in the family group chat of the Thanksgiving place cards already set on the dining table, one seat missing. My mother had typed, "We decided not to set yours. No point pretending." My sister added a laughing emoji. My brother posted, "Maybe failure will be her side dish this year." I stared at the screen, then at the small apartment they all loved to ridicule. The apartment I paid for myself. The apartment no one had ever helped me furnish. The apartment where every lamp, every plate, every bill, every quiet victory had been earned without their approval. Then another message came through from a cousin I barely spoke to. "They're telling people you refused to help the family and abandoned Thanksgiving." That made me sit up. They weren't just insulting me in private. They were building a story, smearing me before I could speak. And because I work in financial investigations, because numbers always leave trails and lies always get sloppy, one sick thought slid into place. Families like mine never panic unless money is already burning. $52,000 wasn't a random number. It was a drowning number. Close to midnight, I logged into an old bank portal tied to the account where I'd once transferred small amounts for emergencies. Empty, obviously, but the login history showed a recent device ping from Tacoma. My parents' house. Not a misunderstanding, not borrowing. Theft. I leaned back, exhaled once, and whispered into the empty room. So that's what this is really about. They hadn't banned me because I was a failure. They'd ban me because I was the only one in the family who could see the math behind the performance. And somewhere under all that cruelty, they were already desperate. At 1:30 in the morning, 3 days later, someone started pounding on my door hard enough to shake the frame and send a tremor through the glasses in my kitchen cabinet. It wasn't a normal knock. It was frantic, uneven, desperate, the kind of pounding people use when they've run out of lies and need panic to do the rest. I sat straight up in bed before I was fully awake, the glow from my laptop still open on the coffee table, the apartment dark except for the blue wash of the screen. Then I heard my sister's voice, shrill and furious through the wood. "Open up! Naomi, what the hell did you do?" A second later, my brother joined in, slamming his fist against the door like he thought volume could restore control. "Dad's losing it in the car. He won't even come upstairs. Open the damn door." Then came my mother. And that was the one that almost made me laugh, because suddenly her tone had changed completely. Gone was the woman who laughed when they stole from me. Gone was the woman who called me an embarrassment on speakerphone while the rest of the family treated my humiliation like entertainment. Now she sounded breathless, fragile, almost maternal. "Please, baby, I'm sorry. We didn't mean it. We just need to see you. Please open the door." I stood slowly, my feet cold against the hardwood, and for a moment I didn't move toward the door at all. I just listened. More pounding, my sister cursing, my brother muttering something vicious under his breath, my mother switching from sobbing to pleading so fast it sounded rehearsed, and then, through the door, low and sharp and not meant for me to hear, I caught my mother hissing at somebody farther down the hall. "If she doesn't open this door, we lose everything." The sentence hit me with a kind of stillness I'll never forget. Not because I was surprised they needed something. I already knew that. But hearing it said so nakedly, stripped of performance, changed the whole shape of the night. They were not here because they loved me. They were not here because they regretted what they had done. They were here because whatever had started unraveling was moving faster than they expected, and I was no longer answering the phone. A second later, my sister whispered, "Did you tell her about the cards?" My brother snapped back, "Shut up, just shut up." Cards, debt, accounts, pressure. It all clicked into place a little harder. I finally walked toward the door, but I stopped short of the peephole. I didn't want to see their faces yet. I wanted to hear them when they thought tears might still work. "Naomi," my mother cried again, louder now, the kind of loud meant for neighbors. "Please, baby, we're worried sick." Worried. That word nearly made me sick. 3 days earlier, I was a failure too shameful to let into Thanksgiving dinner. 3 days earlier, they stole my emergency money, laughed while they demanded $52,000, and told me not to call until I had something useful to offer them. Now I was suddenly baby again. Now they were worried. I backed away from the door, turned off the lamp in the living room, and let the apartment fall into complete darkness. Outside, the pounding continued for another minute, then softened into knocking, then into pleading, then into angry whispers that rose and fell in jagged bursts. I sat on the floor beside the couch, knees pulled up, and listened to my family unravel on the other side of a locked door while the city beyond my windows stayed calm and glittering and completely indifferent. After nearly 40 minutes, I heard the elevator ding, then silence. I stayed where I was long after they left, not because I was afraid they'd come back, but because for the first time in my life, I felt something stronger than fear when it came to them. I felt distance. Clear, cold, necessary distance. And underneath that, something even stranger. Relief. Because once you hear the truth hiding under the apology, you can never mistake desperation for love again. The next morning, I woke up with only 3 hours of sleep in my system and more clarity than I'd had in years. My phone had 17 missed calls, 9 voicemails, and a pile of texts that swung wildly between rage, guilt, confusion, and fake tenderness. My brother, "You need to fix this." My sister, "I can't believe you do this to Mom." My mother, "Please call me, I haven't slept all night." My father sent only one message, and somehow it sounded exactly like him, even in writing. "Whatever stunt you pulled, end it now." I read all of them without responding, then made coffee and opened my laptop at the small kitchen table they all loved to mock as proof that I had no real life. The apartment was quiet. Seattle was gray and wet outside the window. And for the first time in years, the silence didn't feel lonely. It felt useful. I did what I always do when emotions get too loud. I organized evidence. I pulled bank statements, screenshots, archived texts, old email chains, family chat logs, even voicemails I had kept for reasons I never fully admitted to myself. Some part of me had always known the day would come when I would need proof that the cruelty was real. Proof that I hadn't exaggerated. Proof that what they called teasing, pressure, family expectations, and tough love had always been something uglier. Around 10 in the morning, I texted the one person I trusted enough to say the whole truth to. Camilla Reed, the senior analyst who trained me when I first joined the firm, the closest thing I had to a mentor, and one of the only people who had ever looked at me without trying to measure my worth against marriage, motherhood, square footage, or social performance. "You free?" I wrote. She called me before I could put the phone down. "What happened?" she asked immediately. I told her everything. The call at work, the speakerphone humiliation, the stolen $4,000, the $52,000 demand, the lies about the family vote, the 1:30 a.m. pounding, the whispered line in the hallway. "If she doesn't open this door, we lose everything." Camilla didn't interrupt. She let me empty the entire story into the silence between us. When I finished, she said very calmly, "Naomi, this is not family conflict. This is coercion, theft, and reputational abuse wrapped in blood ties." I closed my eyes when she said it because the accuracy of it almost hurt. Not in a bad way. In the way truth hurts when it finally lands in the exact place a lie has been living for years. After we hung up, I opened a blank document and typed a title that came to me before I could censor it. What they call Love When Control Stops Working. Then I started writing. Not melodramatically, not like a victim begging to be believed, but cleanly, like a woman creating a record. As I wrote, memories surfaced with brutal precision. My father smiling in public while minimizing every achievement I brought home. My mother telling me, after church one Sunday, that educated women intimidate men and that I'd end up alone if I didn't learn how to be more grateful and less opinionated. My brother borrowing money and never repaying it while still being treated like the golden child because he looked good in family photos. My sister mocking my apartment, my clothes, my age, my choices, then turning around and asking me to edit her resume or review her lease because I was the practical one. Thanksgiving at 19, when an internship offer was met with polite shrugs because it didn't come with a fiancé. Christmas at 24, when my parents called me selfish for hesitating to help with a family emergency that turned out to be debt my brother had hidden after a luxury vacation. A 4th of July cookout where my cousin Aubrey's second house was toasted like a patriotic achievement, while my promotion was dismissed with, "That's nice, but when are you going to settle down?" I kept writing until my hands cramped. Then, I kept going. Around noon, Camilla sent a text that I read at least 5 times. "When the whole room benefits from you feeling small, your healing will always look like rebellion to them." I stared at that line for a long time, then archived the family group chat, removed myself from shared accounts, changed my emergency contact, updated my beneficiary information, and took my parents' house off every autofill form that still carried the ghost of obligation. These were small administrative actions, but they felt monumental. Each one was a declaration that my life was no longer structurally connected to people who treated access to me like ownership. By the end of the afternoon, what I felt wasn't sadness, it was exposure. As if I had finally turned on a light in a room everyone kept insisting was naturally dark. By late afternoon, I had spread everything across my kitchen table: printed bank activity, handwritten notes, screenshots of texts, voicemail transcripts, timestamps from login histories, and a legal pad where I had started mapping the sequence of events the way I would for any fraud review at work. Once I stopped looking at my family as family and started looking at them as a pattern, the shape of the truth became obvious. The demand for $52,000 hadn't been random. It had been exact, urgent, and spoken with the sort of confidence people use when they're already cornered. I started tracing what I could through public records, old conversations, and the loose carelessness of people who never expect the failure in the family to be the one who understands numbers best. It didn't take long before the story underneath the cruelty emerged. My parents hadn't just been overspending, they'd been juggling disaster. Credit card balances rolled into personal loans patched over with cash advances, minimum payments made with money siphoned from wherever they could find it, and all of it hidden behind holiday centerpieces, curated family photos, and smug commentary about everybody else's life choices. Even worse, a recent filing showed they had leveraged the house in a refinancing deal that looked ugly, rushed, and expensive. My father, who had mocked me for years over renting an apartment, had apparently tied his pride to a mortgage structure so fragile it could crack under one missed payment. The house he weaponized against me wasn't security. It was stage design. Then I found the piece that made the midnight visit make perfect sense. My brother had tagged me in a public Facebook post 2 nights before Thanksgiving. It had already been deleted, but one of my cousins had screenshotted it and sent it to me privately with the message, "You deserve to know." In the post, he wrote, "Imagine being so selfish you won't help your own parents after all they sacrificed." My sister had commented, "She always plays victim when people expect accountability." My mother had liked both comments. They had tried to shame me publicly, to pressure me into paying by damaging my reputation before I had a chance to speak. That wasn't desperation anymore. That was strategy. That was a coordinated attempt to isolate me socially and morally so they could present extortion as duty. I sat back in my chair and laughed once, humorlessly, because it was so predictable in retrospect. Families like mine don't just hurt you in private, they recruit an audience. They don't just demand obedience. They build a narrative where your resistance becomes proof of your guilt. I documented everything. I filed a report with the bank regarding unauthorized access to the money they had taken from my old room account. I froze every remaining connection tied to a shared family storage box that still had my name attached to it. I changed passwords, updated security questions, removed old recovery emails, and called the customer service departments I needed to call, with a voice so steady the agents had no idea I was quietly dismantling the last wires connecting my life to the people who raised me. Then I returned to the essay and added the paragraph I had been circling emotionally for years. The most dangerous families are often the ones most committed to appearances. They do not see you as a person to love, but as a role to manage. If you refuse the role, they call you cruel. If you resist exploitation, they call you selfish. If you finally tell the truth, they call it betrayal. I read that paragraph 3 times before saving it. Around 8 p.m., my father finally left a voicemail. His voice was shaking, but not with grief, with fury. "Whatever game you're playing, stop it now. People are asking questions. You're making us look bad." Us. Not sorry. Not worried about me. Not ashamed that they stole from me and laughed while doing it. Concerned only that the image was cracking. I played the voicemail twice more and smiled for the first time in days. Because there it was. The thing I'd been waiting for without realizing it. Proof that the real panic had nothing to do with family, and everything to do with control. They had spent years training me to respond to accusation, panic, guilt, and emergency, as if all four were my responsibility. But that night, sitting alone in my small rented apartment with paperwork spread out around me like armor, I finally understood something clean and irreversible. The most devastating revenge is not shouting back. It is refusing to rescue people from consequences they manufactured themselves. And once I knew that, I was no longer afraid of whatever came next. I was ready for it. Thanksgiving night was nearly over when they came back for the second time, and I knew from the first buzz downstairs that this visit would be different. The sound was longer, harder, less theatrical, and more ragged, like whatever had been holding them together all week had finally split open. Then came another buzz, then another. Then footsteps in the hallway, fast and uneven, followed by fists against my apartment door. This time, I went to the peephole immediately. My mother stood closest, hair damp from the rain, coat half-buttoned, face swollen and blotched like she'd been crying for hours, or wanted me to think she had. My sister stood beside her in heels that looked wrong for the weather, mascara smudged down one side of her face. My brother's jaw was clenched so hard I could see it even through the lens. He looked furious, which in my experience usually meant frightened. And down at the curb through the building's front glass, I could just make out my father sitting motionless behind the wheel of a dark SUV, both hands gripping the steering wheel, too proud to come upstairs and too desperate to leave. I opened the door only a few inches and kept the chain latched. "You have 2 minutes," I said. My mother immediately stepped forward like she thought tears were a key. "Baby, please, don't call me that," I said. 3 days ago, I was a failure, an embarrassment, and a bill you wanted paid. Pick one of those and be consistent. She froze. My brother shoved closer. "This has gone too far." "No," I said. "This reached exactly where you all drove it." My sister started crying, whether from shame or panic or exhaustion, I couldn't tell. "Mom's getting calls," she said. "Dad's lender froze things. People saw the Facebook post before Grant deleted it. Cousin Melissa sent screenshots around. Grandma found out about the money." I felt my grip tighten on the edge of the door. "Grandma found out what money?" I asked, though I already knew. My sister looked down. My mother answered instead, voice breaking. "The 4,000. She knows. She knows we took it." "And she knows she never voted against me?" I asked. Silence. That silence gave me more satisfaction than I expected. My father had used Grandma's name as cover, probably assuming I'd never ask, never compare stories, never challenge the script. Even now, none of them could say it directly. My brother finally muttered, "Dad shouldn't have said that." I laughed once, softly. "That's your revision? He shouldn't have said that?" My mother reached for the door again. "We were under pressure, Naomi. We made mistakes. We used the money to stop a payment from bouncing. We were going to put it back." "With what?" I asked. "The 52,000 you demanded from me after banning me from Thanksgiving?" She started crying harder. "Please don't do this." I stared at her. "I'm not doing anything. I'm simply not fixing what you did." That was when my brother lost patience. "We need help," he snapped. There it was. No more dancing around it. No more pretending this was about reconciliation. Just the naked ask, dragged out into the hall where even the walls could hear it. "Dad could lose the house," my sister whispered. "Mom says if that happens, everything falls apart." "Everything already fell apart," I said. "You just didn't notice until it started happening to you." My mother's face crumpled. "Please, Naomi, your father will never recover from this." "That," I said evenly, "is not my responsibility." My brother swore and took a step forward so fast the chain on the door tightened. "So that's it? You're really going to let your own family drown?" I met his eyes and didn't look away. "You stole from me. You extorted me. You lied about Grandma. You mocked me in front of the whole family. You tried to shame me publicly online because you thought humiliation would get you paid. And now you're standing here talking about drowning as if you didn't spend years holding my head under the water." Nobody spoke. The hallway felt suddenly smaller, like the truth itself had taken up physical space. My mother whispered, "What do you want from us?" It was a strange question, because what I had wanted from them for most of my life had been so simple. Honesty, respect, basic decency, a seat at the table that wasn't conditional. But by then, I didn't want any of that from them anymore. I wanted distance. I wanted terms. I wanted the power to define the boundary instead of pleading for mercy inside theirs. "Here's what happens next," I said. "The 4,000 you took is gone. Consider it partial repayment for years of emotional abuse, manipulation, and theft. From now on, none of you contact me unless it is in writing. No surprise visits, no phone calls, no involving extended family, no contacting my workplace, no vague messages about emergencies. If any of you lie about me again, threaten me, or try to publicly shame me, I will release everything. The voicemails, the screenshots, the account access records, the post your son deleted, all of it." My sister covered her mouth. My mother looked like I had slapped her. My brother went pale, then angry again. "You'd destroy us?" he said. "No," I answered. "I'd stop protecting you." That was the line that landed. I saw it in all three faces at once. Because that was the arrangement they had depended on forever. That no matter how cruel they got, I would absorb it privately. That I would preserve their image while they dismantled mine. My mother started sobbing so hard she had to brace herself against the wall. Please, Naomi, please. We're your family. I felt something settle inside me then, something final and strangely calm. I know, I said. That's what makes this unforgivable. My brother muttered, Dad was right about you. I know he thinks so, I said. Men like him always hate the moment someone stops mistaking compliance for love. Then I looked at all three of them and said the truth I should have learned years earlier. Maybe I'll forgive some of this one day for my own peace. But I am not coming back. You did not lose me this week. You lost me the day you decided I only belonged in this family when I was useful, ashamed, and obedient. My mother broke completely at that, the sound tearing out of her so raw it echoed down the hall. My sister whispered my name like a plea. My brother said nothing at all. And then, before any of them could rearrange themselves into a new version of the lie, I closed the door. The click of the lock sounded small. But to me, it sounded like history ending. The apartment was silent after they left. But it wasn't the silence I had feared most of my life. It wasn't rejection. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't the hollow quiet of being abandoned. It was the silence that comes after a door closes on something that should have ended years earlier. I stood there with my hand on the lock for a long time, feeling my pulse begin to slow, listening to the elevator descend, listening to footsteps fade, listening to rain tap softly against the hallway window at the far end. Then I turned back toward my living room, toward the lamp, the couch, the half-finished mug of tea gone cold on the coffee table, and the open laptop waiting like a witness. My apartment had never felt bigger than it did in that moment. Not because the square footage changed, but because shame had finally left the room. I sat down, reopened the essay, and read it from the beginning with fresh eyes. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't vindictive. It wasn't written to destroy anyone. It was written to stop disappearing. At the end, I added 3 lines that felt less like writing and more like truth, finally finding its proper form. Family is not supposed to be the place where dignity is negotiated. Leaving people who only love you when you're useful is not cruelty. And the most complete revenge is not ruining the people who hurt you. It is building a life that no longer needs their permission to feel whole. Then I hit publish. For a minute, nothing happened. The room stayed still. The city lights beyond my window reflected softly in the glass. I almost laughed at myself for expecting lightning. But then my phone buzzed. 1 notification, then another, then 6 more, then a flood. Comments, shares, private messages. Not from the people I had spent years trying to convince. From strangers. A woman in Ohio who wrote, I'm sitting in my car outside my parents' house reading this because I don't know if I can go in. A man in Colorado who said, my family called me selfish every time I refused to be their emergency fund. A teacher in Arizona who wrote, this is the first time I've seen someone explain the difference between love and control so clearly. A college student who said, I thought maybe I was dramatic. Now I think I was trained to doubt myself. A grandmother who wrote, I wish I had learned this 30 years ago. I read every message with my throat tight and my hands trembling slightly over the keyboard. Not because I was overwhelmed by attention, but because I realized how many people recognize this pattern instantly. Humiliation renamed honesty, theft renamed sacrifice, obedience renamed respect, silence renamed family loyalty. The response kept growing. A small mental health page reshared the essay with the caption, some of the deepest abuse hides behind tradition and obligation. Then a writer I admired reposted a paragraph about inherited shame and called it devastating and necessary. By midnight, the post had spread farther than I ever intended, and with every new share, the story moved a little farther away from being just mine. Camilla texted me a screenshot of the comment count with 1 sentence. You didn't just tell the truth, you gave people language for what they survived. I leaned back on the couch and cried then, but not the way I used to cry after family holidays or cruel phone calls or backhanded insults delivered with a smile. Those tears always came from confusion, wanting love from people who kept handing me conditions. These tears came from release, from witnessing, from the strange grace of no longer feeling alone in something I had been told my whole life was normal. Around 1 a.m., another message came in from a cousin I barely spoke to anymore. "They read it," she wrote. "Aunt Evelyn is crying. Uncle Mark hasn't said a word in over an hour." Grant's friends found the screenshots of the Facebook post. Tessa locked herself in the bathroom. "Nobody at the house is eating." I stared at the message for a long time. I didn't feel triumph, exactly. Revenge, in its cheapest form, imagines fireworks when the people who hurt you finally suffer. But what I felt was quieter, steadier, and far more satisfying. It was the collapse of the narrative. For years, my family had controlled the story. Naomi is sensitive. Naomi is selfish. Naomi is difficult. Naomi is failing. Naomi should be grateful anyone still invites her at all. But once the truth exists outside their walls, once other people can see the pattern clearly, the lie starts choking on daylight. My mother could cry. My father could sit in angry silence. My brother could lash out at everyone around him. My sister could finally feel the weight of every joke she laughed along with. None of it gave me back the years they took. None of it erased the small humiliations, the constant comparisons, the theft, the coercion, or the way they trained me to apologize for having needs. But it did something important. It ended their monopoly on the story. I made myself fresh tea, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and stood at the window looking out over Seattle. The wet roads, red taillights smeared by rain, apartments stacked with other people's lives and late dinners and private griefs. For the first time in years, I did not feel late to my own life. I did not feel behind because I rented. I did not feel lesser because I was unmarried. I did not feel defective because I built my life quietly instead of performing it loudly. What my family called failure had, in reality, been independence all along. They hated it because independence cannot be manipulated as easily as shame. I thought about the little apartment they had mocked so often, too small, too plain, too temporary, too embarrassing to mention in front of relatives with bigger kitchens and better zip codes. But this apartment was where the truth had lived. This was where every bill had been paid by my own hand, where every piece of furniture had been earned, where no one could enter without my permission, where I had finally learned that peace does not have to be impressive to be sacred. I don't know what story my parents tell now. Maybe my father still says I betrayed the family. Maybe my mother tells people I aired private pain for attention. Maybe my brother insists I overreacted, and my sister says everyone said things they didn't mean. That's the luxury people cling to when consequences finally arrive. They try to rewrite intention as innocence. But I know this now. People who depend on your silence will always call your honesty cruelty. People who mistake access for ownership will always call boundaries betrayal. And people who laugh while you hurt do not get to audition for compassion once the spotlight turns on them. I shut my laptop a little after 2 in the morning and stood again by the window until my reflection in the glass changed. Earlier in the week, it had looked like someone bracing for another blow, another holiday, another demand, another carefully wrapped insult disguised as concern. Now it looked like someone arriving, not healed all at once, not magically unhurt, but present, awake, no longer negotiating with people who wanted obedience dressed up as love. They thought banning me from Thanksgiving would make me desperate enough to buy my way back into the family. They thought public shame would weaken me. They thought if they mocked me hard enough, I'd return carrying money and apology and gratitude for the chance to be used again. Instead, they pushed me past the last point of fear. 3 days after my father banned me from Thanksgiving, they ended up at my door asking for the daughter they had humiliated, exploited, and underestimated. They didn't get her back. What stood on the other side of that door was someone they no longer knew how to control. And if there is any lesson in that, it's one I wish I had learned years earlier. The people who make you earn your right to exist in peace are not protecting family. they are protecting power. Walking away from that is not abandonment. Sometimes it is the first real act of self-respect. Sometimes it is rescue. And sometimes, when the door finally closes and the guilt doesn't follow you inside, it is the beginning of your real life.
From my point of view, this story is powerful because the revenge is not loud or cruel. It comes from clarity, self-respect, and the courage to stop protecting people who keep causing harm. What makes the ending satisfying is that the main character does not destroy her family. She simply refuses to let them control her anymore. That kind of strength feels deeply real and meaningful. What about you? If the people closest to you all evaluate you when you were useful, would you keep trying to earn their love, or would you finally choose yourself?